Well, ladies and gentlemen, we haven't talked about Ukraine and what's going on in that part of the world for a while, so we thought we'd do a podcast on that. So, what do you think of the chances of Ukraine dealing with the Russian invasion now that they've become the masters of the drone industry? Would be the question I've asked the viewers and ask you too, Cal. What do you think of what's happening with drone production?
I think it's a fool's game.
How do you
I,
mean?
I think I think that what it's done is it's made the battlefield vacant, but the battlefield is still a battlefield. It's not changed much at all. It just has
So you
changed.
think they're just poking the bear and the bear's sitting there, well, geez, I'm going to take a bit of this, but I'm not going to take a lot of it? Or do you feel that
Essentially,
it's pushing people towards coming to the negotiation table? Like Putin really hasn't negotiated. He negotiates like Trump does. He demands everything and he feels he holds all the cards. So I feel that, the drone technology has given the Ukrainian defense mechanism a very strong defendable position, and now they've been using them as key components of strategic strikes that are, like they say, bringing the sanctions to the Russian oil industry. So I think it's
I
effective.
oh oh I agree. I agree. They're very effective and they're escalating. And the trouble is, in order to checkmate that escalation, you either have to hit the drone manufacturing or you have to hit the civilian infrastructure so hard that there's no ability to make drones anymore. So we're looking at is temporary Ukrainian successes. And if we read only the Western press, the Ukrainians are winning this one. And if
Well,
you
it's
and if
not
you
just
if you,
that. It's you do have positive and negative spins on it, depending on where your news source is, but that's a problem around the world. But disregarding various news sources, you just have to look at the results. There's what 1.3 to 1.5 million casualties on the Russian side alone, and of that, they figure there's 50, 60, maybe even up to 80,000 KIA in that. So when you start looking at the numbers and then looking at the number of vehicles, airplanes, tanks, and recorded demolition by the Ukrainian drones on the Russian vehicles, you start seeing that those are only videotaped by the drones that they count. They don't count the ones that they don't have video footage on. So you're starting to see that this is a catastrophic war that makes the First and Second World Wars look pretty small in comparison, I think.
you're so far away on that one, right?
Oh,
And okay, let's pretend that there's a million dead on each side in the Ukrainian war here
yeah,
in 5 years. Let's say that a million. Soviet Union losses in World War II were 27 million people.
right.
27 million.
Yeah.
And World War One, the fatalities in World War One were huge as well. This war so far is tiddlywinks.
Well,
It sounds cruel, but look how
but
many people the Israelis have killed in just 2 years alone. And look how many people are dying in Africa in the conflicts there. So this conflict has fallen off everybody's news sheet because of the
yeah,
war
but
in
now
in the
let me reiterate. Like the Ukraine is the breadbasket of Europe, and a lot of the food that they were manufacturing went to starving nations in Africa. And the death toll of people starving to death in Africa has to be adding up, and we're not counting that as part of the war toll. And disease and people dying, from the side effects like PTSD and all these sort of things, they start to add up, and we're not able to calculate them. So I'm not sure that the impacts of this Ukraine war are fully analyzed and calculated when we start analyzing what's really the impact their production of food and resources not getting to starving people. And there's hundreds of millions of people that are starving and many of them dying. So we got to take the blinders off and say this affects a lot of people in the world that aren't living in Ukraine, but the effects are real. So,
Well,
the fact that it lasted longer than World War One, I mean, how long has this war lasted?
in any event, if you look at the other side of this coin as well, there's almost 6 million Ukrainian refugees that are outside of the Ukraine, and there's another over 5 million internally displaced. So that's that's nearly 11, 12 million people that are living essentially somewhere else.
Right.
That's a huge significant part of the population, and that costs money. If you look at these host countries like Poland, they're paying in Germany, they're paying to put these people in apartments, they're paying for their food, and that is a drain on the countries that are, I think, stoking the fire here, and that's NATO. I blame NATO.
I think you've been propagandized blaming NATO when it first came out, and what it actually is, in my opinion, is that Trump and the Republican Party in the United States were aligned with Russia at the time of the invasion and did not and failed to act because the House and the Senate were run by the Republican Party and they would not act against Russia. Had Ukraine been given the weapons to defend themselves back at the start of this war, we'd be in a position where Russia would be short of oil and would have been at the negotiation table to negotiate a peace settlement. They have not really honestly came to the table to negotiate. They came to the table to take over and subjugate Ukraine. Big difference in ideology. And when you start looking at when you're looking at the Iran war, you start to see that that's the same issue and same problem. So you can't trust U.S. in negotiations, and you can't trust Russia in negotiations. They feel that their big power and nuclear weapons give them, the advantage over everybody else, and that's not a good thing. So, what do you think, folks?
Well, it wasn't the Republicans in power when the war started.
They still had the Senate, and it was a lack of action by. I think Obama was in charge then, wasn't he?
Well, Biden was inaugurated on January 2021, so the invasion was November 2021, so it's Biden.
No, well, that war has been going on since 2000, whatever, they invaded Crimea. But if you're talking when that happened, the Republicans ran the House and the Senate. They had full control of government, and they ran the Supreme Court. So they had total control of three bodies of government, and Biden couldn't do anything because his hands were tied. He couldn't pass through legislation, and he could only put in a few executive orders. Yeah, Biden was, afraid to do anything against Ukraine because Trump was saying his son was working with the Ukrainian government. So all these allegations that Trump was tainting the waters with tied the hands of the U.S. government. So it's all Republicans at fault. Sorry, I disagree. And history shows that I'm correct, that the propaganda war against Biden's son was used to prevent Biden from coming to the aid of Ukraine, and the House and the Senate were Republican Party run. And now that you got all four bodies of government controlling the last 2 years, Trump has not come to the aid of Ukraine. He's made sure that weapons were not given to them, promised weapons were not received, and he did everything to undermine. I mean, look at the belittling of Zelensky in front of Trump. He did that with the intent to show that you're going to get on your knees to my buddy Putin and you're going to surrender Ukraine. That's what I've seen, and how many of the viewers seen the same thing? Because my eyesight doesn't seem to be that good if you're saying that didn't happen. And it did happen in front of the world.
Whoa. What did I say didn't happen?
Well, I didn't say you didn't say it. I said if
There,
the
good,
world
okay,
didn't see, if the world,
good.
if our viewers in the world didn't see that, Trump was acting against Ukraine and Zelensky's meeting where he belittled him and demanded him surrender to Russia, then you are missing the point that this has been an ongoing battle that the Republican Party has backing Putin because Trump was their figurehead leader, and who knows what Putin has over Trump, but for the last 10 years, it's being blocked by Trump and his regime. So you can call it whatever you want. It's political gamemanship at both sides, and Ukraine lost. And the death toll from the disruption of the European breadbasket production being down, it hurts countries all around the world, and people have died due to starvation. Not to mention the direct bombing and missile attacks on civilians in Ukraine by Russia. And nobody's really holding Russia to account. I mean, France and Britain did invade a couple of tankers on the open sea, and it resulted in Starmer having to resign. So, I mean, there are implications, and you see the fallout all around the world. So
I think it's an unfortunate situation, and the Ukrainians are puppets of the U.S. and NATO, and unfortunately, they became the cannon fodder. Poland and Germany don't want to fight Russia on Poland and German soil, so they're going to put the Ukrainians up to do all the dying for them, and I think it's horrible. And the other thing is, the Americans are profiting immensely. 80% of the European oil and gas, the liquefied natural gas, comes from the U.S. now. It used to come from, Russia. So the Americans have placed Russia as a stranglehold on the energy needs of Europe. Europe is now paying the highest prices of oil, natural gas than they have in years because it's coming from America. The Americans are making money hand over fist. They're now selling weapons to the European NATO countries to provide to Ukraine for free, and so the Americans are making money there. So Trump has no motivation to end this conflict, none
no, and
whatsoever.
that's why I say this is actually the Third World War. It's an economic war. There's so much money and profit being made at the expense of war that they do not want to shut it down. Putin, the economy is based on the war machine. He doesn't care about the oil. He cares about whether people have employment or not, so they're happy at home, so they don't want to overthrow the government. So everybody's making money, and the victims are the Ukraine people, and that's
Yes.
wrong. And I think Europe has caught on to that game, and that's why they're coming out strong in support of Ukraine, because if Ukraine falls, there will be another war. You can see the history of they want to keep perpetual wars on the table that are large and meaningful. So I would say Poland would be the next Russian target. It would be a meaningful war. Russia could, stalemate the front lines there for quite a while, and U.S. and Russia make nothing but money. So therein lies the problem. The Third World War is just not about death and targeting of civilians. It's also about the economic wars of the oligarchs and the wealthy to make more money during the conflict and to hold power in politics. So we do have underlying issues. What do you see happening around Ukraine for the next while? Do you think they'll be coming to the table with Putin to negotiate a peace deal?
No, not a
I don't
chance.
think so either.
I
do see one development happening is that in the last month, Ukraine has targeted isolation program for Crimea. They have cut the roads in the north. They've done effective drone strikes on infrastructure there. They've hit and targeted the oil storage facilities on Crimea, and they're just waiting now for the demolition of the Crimean bridge and the Crimean railroad track going to Crimea. And you'll see that, my predictions are, you'll see that it's a softening maneuver of isolation. So they're softening Crimea access. They got no fuel. They got lack of water, lack of food coming across. They've destroyed all the ferries, or the majority of the ferries, and now you're going to see in the next few months that they're just going to let the toll happen on the resources that are still on the island. And come fall, when the weather starts to get cooler, I think there's going to be an attempt by the Ukraine military to actually isolate and invade, whether by land or by sea. They're going to put men and boots on the grounds in Crimea. And with the drone army that they're able to manufacture now, I see that as a real possibility. And there's not much Russia can do if the bridge is blown. So should be an interesting time.
I'll bet against that.
Well,
I'll bet that if the Ukrainians make a significant move against Crimea, the Russians will go into Odessa and they'll cut off the Ukraine from the Black Sea totally.
They had no ability to get to Odessa, so I call your bet. What's going to happen is they're going to cross the river at Kherson. They're going to do a attempt to free the nuclear power plant there, and then they're going to isolate the northern part of Crimea, and then they're going to do a land invasion and ground troops in from the north, and that should be accomplished by spring of the year at the latest. And that's because there's no means of getting food, weapons, and shipment to the people there. Crimea's got 1 million people, they estimate there, and that's a huge amount of food, water, fuel you have to get there. And when you let it soften for 3-4 months and they use up all their reserves, there's not much fight left in them because there's no fuel to run their trucks or their tanks or their military operations. So that's what they did over in Kherson, and it worked very effectively. And Russia sees that, and they're having a hard time on the front lines right now. They can't handle a major front line of that scale, but it's also going to put a hardship on the resources of the Ukraine army to open up that front. So there are lots of possibilities. I see that if they do attack on Crimea, Putin's going to pressure Belarus to invade in the north to put more pressure on the troops of Ukraine. And that's one of the underlying problems. And it could tap the resources of the Ukraine army and draw Belarus in. If Belarus is drawn in, other countries may have to step in, like Poland. So we're still on the precipice of all-out war on multiple fronts in Europe. So that's my take.
Well, I think Belarus will probably is the next target for NATO. I think
NATO didn't target Ukraine. So.
I disagree. I think
I don't know where you got your news, but
you forget that mop-haired idiot from England told Ukrainians not to sign the peace agreement that was worked out. There's been more than one. The Minsk agreement, for example, it was an international agreement between the Donbass separatists, the armed Russian separatists, Russian regular forces, and Ukrainian forces, called for an immediate ceasefire, monitored by some organization, immediate release of all prisoners, withdrawal of illegal armed groups, foreign soldiers, and mercenaries from Ukraine, withdrawal of heavy weaponry. So back in 2014, they already had an agreement.
Who broke that agreement? The Russians did. They wanted more land. So you just reiterated my issue is that no peace agreement can be trusted with Russia. All they did was build up their army again, and as soon as they thought they had all their army in place and they had the blessing of Trump and the Republican Party that the U.S. wouldn't intervene, they did a full-scale invasion again. So now you've got a problem. You can't trust any deal. So Ukraine...
No, but the thing is, it's the Ukrainians that failed to sign it. The last one in 2019.
Well, the Russians breached all the previous ones. So you're talking historical documents where, I wouldn't trust anything the Russians have to say or do now because they breach every ceasefire agreement they have. Like, you'd be a fool to agree to a ceasefire. Bring them to their knees, and that's what Ukraine is doing. And if it draws Europe into the war, Europe should have been in this war a long time ago. They could have stopped the aggression real quickly and saved tens of thousands of civilian lives, and they refused to. So now they're doing the right thing. They're aiding in the manufacturing of weapons, and Ukraine now is one of the leading drone manufacturers, and military might of the drone army of Ukraine is being sought around the world. So, yeah, I think the pendulum has swung in favor of Ukraine, and they're doing the right thing. They're wearing down the resistance of the Russian army and cutting supply lines and making it very difficult for the Russians. And my prediction is Putin will be on his knees begging for a deal, and the deal will be signed by Ukraine when they set the terms. So
I'll bet against that.
I know you would.
I bet that if it continues much longer, the Russians are going to escalate it to the point where it becomes a slaughter, and it's going to be something that people will regret for the next half dozen decades.
You don't think sending in 2,000-3,000 tanks would have been the slaughter maneuver? They already did that on the initial invasion. Failed.
Well,
Big F.
obviously, we're playing armchair, general here.
Well,
but
that's what we are. But I see the pendulum has already swung, and Ukraine is now holding all the cards, and they're called drones. The Ukraine drone army is very effective, puts human life at the military personnel of Ukraine at minimal risk, and it's a very effective deterrent against the might of the Russian army. So, yeah, it's changed everything, and it's very effective. So, yeah, the chances of Putin taking over Ukraine now, he'd have to bomb manufacturing facilities in all of Europe, because that's where they're being manufactured and shipped to Ukraine. So I think the genie's out of the bottle, and it's in favor of Ukraine now, and it is time that Putin got that in his head, that come and negotiate peace or face the consequences. I think Ukraine in 2 years can liberate all their lands. So
it's my position that the NATO in the Ukraine is an existential threat to Russian survival. They know that. They don't want NATO missiles within 5 minutes of Moscow. They will not let it happen.
They're now 5 minutes from Moscow because Poland joined NATO. So,
no, let me finish. Let me finish. No, Poland's a long ways away still, but let me bring your memory back down to the Cuban crisis, which is still ongoing after 70 plus years. The Americans would not tolerate a foreign influence in North or South America. That's how regional the Americans were. So the Americans should look at Europe and go, okay, NATO was set up to checkmate Russia. That's the whole purpose of NATO. And so NATO's been in existence since the middle late 40s, intentionally trying to box in Russia. Russia is at a point now where it's going, you're too close. We're gonna, we're gonna fight back, and that makes sense to me. You corner a badger, and the badger's going to strike back.
Finland joined NATO, and that puts missiles closer to Russia.
And I think it's a huge mistake.
Russia failed to invade Finland. They took some of the land from Finland. Now, if you were claiming that NATO is an aggressive state, NATO would, yes, now that Finland is a member, go reclaim the land that Russia took from Finland in the
When did
war.
Russia take land from Finland?
Just during or after World War II. There was the Winter War in Finland. So, I mean, it's, if that truly was the case, then go take back the land, and that would silence the bear, because I don't think they could handle another front.
You remember Finland was on the German side.
Well, Finland
They were
is
Nazi. They
Finland.
were Nazis.
Well,
Uh,
there you go.
and how much
Sure,
land?
sure. So was Ukraine Nazis, but we're
Yes.
talking what they are now compared to what they might have been. I don't know if they were Nazis or not Nazis. I have no historical information to refute you on that. I think Finland was not part of the German Empire, and I think they fought the Germans in World War II, but I have no way of verifying that. And I think that's why Russia tried to take land from them and probably accused them of being Nazis to justify the war against them. So you can't believe even propaganda coming out of Russia from decades ago. So
Uh,
I we're getting away from the topic
well,
on
no, but let me let me
Ukraine,
let me
but
let me bring you up to speed. Finland participated in the Second World War, followed by another, this time offensive war against the Soviet Union, acting in concert with Nazi Germany, and then switching
well,
sides and fighting with the
where'd
Allies.
you get that?
Wikipedia.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah,
maybe.
no, but
But
they switched sides.
they switched sides back to the
Yeah.
Allied, so maybe they were falsely led. But they've always had a war with Russia anyway. Finland and Russia have always been fighting in the north over land. So
But you're also forgetting that Russia was the biggest ally that lost the most in the
well,
Second
they
World
were an
War.
ally of the U.S. and Europe as well at the start of the war. Then they switched sides. So you see that war is a game of flip flopping. Whoever's going to get the most power and the most money out of it. So when you see countries flipping and flopping, you know it's all about the money and the power. So war is not good for anybody, but I can't see Ukraine flipping and wanting to join Russia after Russia kills civilians and people on the streets, and it ain't gonna happen. Sorry.
See, part of the media that we read doesn't report how many Russian casualties there are, civilian Russian casualties. Now, any one casualty is one casualty too many. But our media
Well,
here is so slanted. It's I don't know. It's
so you're
appalling.
accusing of Ukraine of committing war crimes against civilians in Russia?
They're,
I call
they're both
bullshit.
hitting.
But there might be what they did do a
Of course
land
there are.
invasion in
Of
part
course,
of Russia.
of course they are. They're both killing civilians. Now, when
Yeah,
you
I
fire
don't
a
think
rocket,
so. I think the targeting is the oil factories, and those are legitimate war targets. There may be civilians working there, but they shouldn't be working and aiding in a war machine, so they're part of the war machine, legitimate targets. So you got arguments on either side, but war is not good. You stand a chance of dying if you join the Russian army. You're pretty much fodder, cannon fodder, the old saying was. So I just hope that Ukraine keeps using the ability of the drones. It mitigates lives on Ukraine side, brings maximum hardship and damage to the Russian offensive effort, and the Russians are the aggressors. They started the war, and whatever hell rains down on them from drone army of the Ukraine is justified and deserved. So that's my take, folks. I'd like to hear your opinions on it. Putin should take heed and come to the table for a peace deal. I mean, otherwise, someday he may lose that war. And a compromise is always better than a loss. So that's why they
so
should
so
be at the
what
table negotiating. But
what
Trump
what would
said Ukraine doesn't hold any cards. I think
what
they
would the
hold the drone cards.
what would the terms be, Corey?
Get the hell out of Ukraine would be the first one, and let the people decide in a fair election as to which type of government they want. And I think both sides have seen that Russia is probably not the side you want to be on if you want to have a good lifestyle, because they're willing to send you to any war front lines as human fodder. So, but it's up to the people, and the terms are, would be easy to negotiate. the invader should not profit from an invasion, especially an illegal invasion. The war crimes and criminals committing war crimes should all be handed over to The Hague, because we, the free world, should not allow any war crimes. I don't care what country, how powerful your country is. Your whole country should be held in sanction until you hand over the war criminals, and that would include Putin. So that's probably not going to happen, and that's why Russia keeps fighting, as they know all the oligarchs and supporters of this war committed war crimes, and one of the demands to join the free world again, and maybe the G9 or whatever they want to call it, would be the handing over all their war criminals, and that isn't going to happen. And they know they committed the war crimes. So, yeah, I see a big change coming on the horizon, and Russia's feeling the might of the drone army and the drone cards of Zelensky and Ukraine, and rightly so. Payback's a bitch, as they say, and it's coming. The bitch is coming for you, Putin. That's Ukraine. And the world will be a better place when that peace is achieved, because Ukraine is the breadbasket of Europe, and there's a lot of starving people affected by this war, and they need to start producing food again and become a stable member of Europe. Have a good day.
Bye.
Comment, share. Bye.
Subscribe to the channel, give us a like, and please share the video. Don't be afraid to share this commercial with your friends too.